Football Manager 2025, the game that never was. As some of you may have noticed, and I may have mentioned once or twice here on the channel, for the first time in 30 years, there wasn't a new Football Manager game last November. No midnight downloads, no broken Steam servers, no why does the match engine look the same as last year posts on Reddit. Nothing at all. And it wasn't because Sports Interactive forgot, it wasn't because Sega said no, it was because, and I'm not making this up, the game just wasn't fun. And that's not me being dramatic for once. They're literally the words of the man himself, Miles Jacobson. He sat down to play a build over Christmas and within an hour realised, nope, we can't release this. So what went so catastrophically wrong with FM25 that they had to kill it entirely? And why is Miles now swearing that FM26 will be, and I quote, a great game? The man himself has done a couple of interviews about what went on, so let's dig into them. And we're going to start from the beginning. Because this time last year, FM25 was being hyped up as the big generational leap. We had the new Unity engine, a complete UI redesign, better graphics, a brand new portal system replacing the inbox we've all been moaning about since about Championship Manager 1997-98. And for the first few weeks, it sounded pretty exciting. But then the delays started. First, it was just going to be a couple of weeks late, which was annoying, but fine. Happens all the time. Then we got the second delay all the way to March 2025 and alarm bells did start to ring. Because let's face it, who wants to release a football game in March? 3/4 of the season is already over. And at that point, you may as well rename it last season's Football Manager or something equally catchy. And then, even worse, Football Manager rolled around and boom, cancelled. The first time in Sports Interactive's 30+ year history that they didn't release an annual game. Why? Well, according to Miles in his interviews with Eurogamer and The Athletic this week, it just wasn't fun. And that's brutal because on paper, the game did tick all the boxes. The core engine was running, matches simulated, players trained, the spreadsheets spreadsheeted. But the experience of using the game was horrible. Clunky, confusing, screens double loading, whole menus missing. You couldn't even find your youth squad. And when your own studio director can't find the youth squad, you know you've got a bit of a problem on your hands. And it was that new user interface that was the big culprit. Instead of the inbox that we all know and love, and we're talking about the panel down the left-hand side of the screen that we all spend half our lives clicking through, FM25 had the new portal system, which was basically 3 columns of tiles and cards where all your information is supposed to live. In theory, nice and shiny and modern. In practice, apparently it was a bit of a mess. The information you needed was buried in the wrong place. English-speaking players naturally read left to right, but the most important info was often sat in the middle column, while the right column just sat there like a spare part. It was confusing, it was slow, and most importantly, it killed the magic one more game feeling. Miles said it himself, and we're doing quotes again. I'm going to play this next match, but I've got to do all this stuff first, and it's slow and it's painful. And that's a bit of a death sentence for a Football Manager game. And the crazy thing, and I think probably the worst thing for Football Manager, for Sports Interactive to come out of all this media they've done this week, they saw the warning signs months earlier. Miles admitted in these interviews that he had an inkling even before the FM25 announcement went out in September. But by that point, all the interviews, the marketing spend, the stock market filings, all of that was already lined up. So they couldn't just pull the plug on it. So they announced it anyway. And crucially, and I think this is the bit that is a touch glossed over in the articles, they opened pre-orders anyway at that point. And within 2 days of that, they'd already decided they had to delay the game. And then by Christmas, it was undeniable. Miles did what is apparently his usual holiday tradition, which is boot up the dev build for a couple of weeks, see how it feels, and then come back in January with fresh eyes. I don't want to argue that that is his normal annual tradition, but the game does normally release in October. So what month does Miles celebrate Christmas in? But apparently, within an hour of doing this, he knew the game wasn't releasable, which led to I imagine, pretty awkward conversation with Sega. And as Miles tells it himself, he walked into the COO's office in January and said, I can't put this out. And Sega apparently took it quite well. They started exploring a few options. Could they release it in May or June? They looked at it, but none of that stuff would work commercially and still wouldn't fix that fun problem. So they took probably the most extreme action they could have taken and just cancelled the game completely, which certainly had some implications. Sports Interactive lost an entire year of revenue. All of those licenses, including the brand new Premier League one that they still haven't actually used yet, still had to be paid in full for the year that they didn't release a game. Apparently, some of the partners were angry, some of the others were more understanding, but everybody did get paid. The studio didn't lay anyone off, and in fact, has been continuing to hire throughout all of this, but apparently morale at the studio did take a big hit. And again, Miles himself has said that January felt like living inside a crying emoji. Miles is older than I am. I don't think he actually knows what a crying emoji is, because I'm not entirely sure, but it's a nice soundbite. And obviously for us as fans, it was the worst of both worlds. We had no FM25, but also no official FM24 data update either. They did look into that, as they did explain at the time, but between licenses, technical limitations and manpower costs, it would have meant months of work and actually ended up delaying FM26 even further. So they just left it, which obviously then caused even more people to become annoyed, and it kind of continued to snowball from there. But that is ultimately FM25 in a nutshell. It was too ambitious, badly timed, and fundamentally just not fun. So now we look ahead to FM26. And Miles says this one is different. He says it's nearly feature complete at this point, and crucially, it feels like Football Manager, which is kind of a low bar, but after FM25 is progress and positive, I guess. The UI has been completely overhauled again. The missing basics are back. So we've got the back and forward buttons, a search bar, bookmarks, navigation is streamlined, menus are easier to find, and the whole thing is less painful than the FM25 version was. One developer apparently even said the UI feels like a warm hug. And I mean, I could use a hug. It's been a tough year. I'll take a hug. The Unity engine isn't going anywhere, despite seemingly being the thing that caused a lot of the problem. Miles does admit that the switch was rough, but insists they had no choice but to do it. The old engine was just at the end of the line. They were literally breaking it, trying to build new features. And if they'd have stayed on that, the series would have just ended up stagnating more than it already has done. So yeah, FM25, complete disaster, but long-term, Unity, we are assured, was the right move to make. Those licenses are all safe. The Premier League is still in, along with all of the other partners. Everybody got paid. The relationships are all intact. And Miles is even teasing even more licenses for FM26, which is a huge positive. We all like a license. As far as release timing goes, they are still very vague about all that. Miles says it's going to be a broadly similar time of year, which by my translation means probably an early November 2025 release, give or take a week or two here or there. There is going to be some form of early access or beta, though whether it's branded as such, they still haven't decided. But based on what we get in previous years, we should expect to be playing that, I guess, mid-October. And the most important thing is that Miles is confident. Last December, he admitted that the game wasn't fun. This summer, and we're using his words again, we've got a fucking great game. So what do I think? Honestly, cancelling FM25 sounds like it was the only right call. I know people have been miserable and moaning for the last year, and I mean, not me, I've been sunshine and light, but a few people have been a little bit negative for the last year or so. But imagine the meltdown if they'd actually released the game that Miles is describing in these interviews, a clunky, unfinished, unfun mess with a Premier League logo plastered all over it. Probably wouldn't have gone down very well. It would have completely destroyed the series' reputation overnight. But as it stands, although we're annoyed, I think most of us still have hope for the new game. That being said, and I've said this before, we now have some very high expectations for FM26. They've had 2 years to make it at this point. They've had the Premier League license sat there for those full 2 years, so they can do all sorts of magical things with that. They've had time to fix that new UI, polish the engine, and hopefully make a good game. And if they do, big thumbs up. I'm sure we'll all forget any of this ever happened, and fingers crossed it will feel like the generational leap that we've been waiting for. If it's rubbish though, if it still feels clunky, or if it feels like the new engine is causing more problems than it's solved, then I genuinely think the series is going to be in trouble. Fans aren't going to accept 2 years of waiting for it's not quite as good as it was, is it? Personally, for me, I am deciding to be cautiously optimistic. The fixes they've done do sound sensible. The teaser footage that we saw the other week looked really good. I'd like to see some more of that, please. How soon is soon? They said more news soon. Is this the more news that's soon? It's surely soon now. And the confidence coming from Miles this time does seem, through these articles, genuine. But us Football Manager fans can be a cynical bunch at times, and obviously we have been burned before. So for me, it is a pretty simple equation going into the next few months. FM26 has to be fun. If it's not, no amount of licenses, no amount of fancy menus, no amount of shiny Unity graphics are going to save it. But that's just the views of this handsome entertainer. So what do you think? Was cancelling FM25 the right call, or should they have just shoved it out and patch it like everybody else does? Are you hyped for FM26 at this point, or are you worried that this is just more smoke and mirrors until November? Let me know down in the comments. I am really curious how much faith you've got left in the series as it stands at the moment. And of course, if you want more FM26 coverage as soon as we actually get some, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on notifications, all of that usual stuff, because as soon as we get any kind of news or a beta or anything at all, I will be leaping on it like a rabid, hungry fox. And fingers crossed, I'll be able to find my own youth squad.